All right, to finish things off, I'm going to share my screen, talk about a package that I'm currently building, and we have about 20 minutes left probably of worth of content, and then we'll wrap up for today, but hopefully do another React meetup next month, virtually as well. Desktop 2. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, is that React query there I see? Is that?
It's actually React Fast Prefetch, but I'll definitely be talking about React Query, kind of like we were talking earlier with React Final Form versus Formic or whatever it was. So React Query has a prefetch component to it, but you have to install that whole library. So before I knew that React Query existed, I started creating React Fast Prefetch, which is just one part of kind of that library. I'm not sure how they do it under the hood, but under the hood of React Fast Prefetch, I've been coding it with promises and use ref. So there's no state updates at all. There's no, it's not going to cause any re-renders in your application, and hopefully just kind of give you the benefit of making your user experience slightly faster without, have to add any huge bundles or packages. So right now it's on GitHub. So it's kind of an experimental mode and beta mode. But if you want to go give me a star at any point, definitely collecting stars, because stars are apparently cool on GitHub. Hopefully have it in a kind of a production ready state, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Expecting a baby in the next week, so I don't know, that might throw a damper on things and kind of prevent everything in life, but or kind of change the timeline of everything. But we'll see how much of a damper that throws on things. So the idea of React Fast Prefetch is giving us the ability to start fetching our data before we even hit our component. So right now, usually on kind of when we build our applications, we have like on a component did mount or a use effect. When our application starts to load, or our component starts to load, we start fetching the data. And then once that data finishes getting that data, then we render the component. So in this, with this, we start before the component even starts before we even hit the component, we're starting to fetch that data, and then it's going to start rendering the component, and then it's going to finish pulling in that data and display the component. So to get React Prefetch Fast Prefetch to work, we import React Prefetch Provider, which we wrap our application. Same thing we would do with like a Redux provider or a context provider. And then inside the components that we want to add this prefetching capability, we import this hook, which is use React Prefetch, and we can take out the prefetch function outside of that. And what this allows us to do is to specify a URL, and what it's going to do, it's going to start fetching this URL, the data from this URL, using Axios behind the scenes. Hopefully, I can expand it to allow some other libraries, whether it's just native fetch, or if you want to use Axios or give you more of a choice. Because I know React Query allows that too, and so we're starting to see some suspense with data fetching libraries give us that capability as well. But the idea is this is going to start fetching the data immediately, and then once we start going into our component, it's going to do the second part of the promise, which is the then, and then we can actually use that data. So it's going to give us a couple seconds ahead of time to make our render a little faster. So here's an example of a link, and we're going to this about page. And so on most enter, so as soon as we start mosing over over this link, it's going to start prefetching this data. And then once we actually click down on that link, we already started that promise and started fetching that data. So then once we get to the component, we include that use React Prefetch hook again. We use the fetch data, and what this is going to do, it's going to grab the already fetching promise that we already have out there, and it's hopefully going to have it by the time we even hit this component, and then all we have to do, it's going to go right into the then, and then we can render our component from here. So the idea is kind of, we're seeing this with kind of where the future of suspense with data fetching is going as well, where, Facebook is using this kind of technique already where they're like, if we know a user is pretty likely to go on a link by, either they're a most enter or a most hover or, a most down or whatever kind of, maybe they have some machine learning going on predicting where users are going to go on the site. If we have any sort of, idea that they're going to go there, then we can start fetching that data ahead of time to make that user experience faster. And then, so I have a quick code sandbox here with a couple demos. So this is in here we have so 3 different links and the 3 different techniques for fetching data. One is render then fetch, then we have fetch then render, and then the last one is using this prefetch technique where I'm fetching, you can see on the left here, I'm fetching 3 URLs on most enter of that link. And then when I click down, those 3 promises are already going in the background fetching the data. And then once we hit that page, it's going to start, it most likely will have that data already to render out. And then what I did for a quick performance test is with each of them, after all 3, and the components are listed out in a hierarchy kind of setup so that one is inside of the other. So I have this component that fetches a bunch of images, and then inside the first image, I have another component that fetches a bunch of type names, and then inside that I have another component that fetches a bunch of colors. And then once that third component finishes rendering, I'm gonna timestamp that from the time the component started rendering to the time the component has finished rendering. Both of those steps. So when we look at this, when we look at the first one, we have 339 milliseconds. When we look at the render then fetch, I have 191 milliseconds. And then when I click on the last one, so, it's brought down to 24 milliseconds. This is already after the initial, the initial one has gone out and it's cached. But they are, but even with that being said, even from a cache, that's still cutting the time down quite significantly and making that render immediate. So there's still some things I have to do before making this available for production use. But definitely just kind of want to get it out there, see what people's thoughts were. If you have any questions or concerns, we'd definitely love to hear it. And hopefully this is a step in the right direction before we can use something like suspense for data fetching, which hopefully will come later this year. Is there any questions at all?
My only question was, can I use this in production? So
no, not yet. So it's definitely not, I haven't used it in production yet. Still some things I have to do under the hood to speed things up. Also, there's a couple kind of state updates, safeties under the hood that I have to add with canceling async updates if components are kind of switched and stuff. So some maintenance I have to do there. But once that's all ready and I test it out in a couple production apps, then hopefully we can release this and hopefully get some better benchmarking too with a real production app. And I'd like to maybe next have a good comparison of two apps running next to each other, maybe a video of it showing here's what the user experience is like on one versus using React Fast Prefetch on the other.
Interesting. I'm going to be doing a prefetch this week probably in something I'm
Nice.
working on.
Nice. That's awesome. And I think with like, if you use like just like a standard like HTML link prefetch, like that will go out and fetch the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but it's not going to go out and hit your data calls like this. So, I think this is something that, we can kind of add on top of that and use as well to kind of fetch, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but also the data that you need to have the full package.
Just started. You're at 24 now.
What was that? Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
Was there any more questions?
I have a quick question. Was there a reason you chose to use Axios over just like plain Fetch? I know there's probably options that Axios could take that Fetch wouldn't.
Yeah, no real preference or kind of one or the other. I know that there's like the cancel method that comes with Axios to make it easier for canceling. So I think that's where the big winner for me is going to come when I add that in, so that we're not trying to update state on a component that's already unmounted. But you can definitely do similar things with Fetch and kind of just wrapping it with your own promise.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about canceling it. Yeah.